My name is Diana, and I'm 35 years old. That Sunday dinner at my parents' house in Portland felt different from the moment I walked in. The table was set with the good linen, the nice wine glasses were out, and everyone was already smiling a little too wide. I sat down, poured myself some water, and waited. Then my sister-in-law Vanessa leaned forward, looked straight at me, and said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Your condo is so nice and spacious, let Marcus and me move in with you. You can just rent a small apartment somewhere." My brother Marcus nodded right away, like the plan was already settled. Mom smiled warmly across the table, and Dad raised his glass a little as if toasting the brilliant idea. They all looked at me, waiting for me to agree. The room went quiet. I set my glass down, slowly feeling every pair of eyes on me. Then I said, calm as I could, "I've already sold it." For a second, nobody moved. Vanessa's mouth actually dropped open. Dad stood up so fast his chair scraped loud against the floor. "Why would you sell it?" he shouted, voice booming across the table. Marcus stared at me like I'd lost my mind, and Mom's face went from pleased to stunned in an instant. No one touched their food after that. The evening turned into a full-blown argument right there at the table, accusations flying before I even had a chance to explain anything. If you've ever had family assume your home, your money, or your life is theirs to rearrange. Whenever it suits them, you're going to want to hear the rest of this story. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I promise it gets worse before it gets real. Let's dive in. A few weeks before that dinner, the signs had already started showing up little by little. It began when I noticed unusual charges on my parents' credit card statement, the one they sometimes left open on the kitchen counter when I visited. They had paid the full rent for my brother Marcus Evans, who's 32, and his wife, my sister-in-law Vanessa Evans, for the third time this year. The amount was the exact monthly figure for their two-bedroom apartment downtown. When I asked Mom about it casually over coffee, she brushed it off with a wave of her hand and said they were just helping out during a rough period. Dad nodded along, adding that family supports each other no matter what. I didn't push further then, but the pattern felt too familiar to ignore. A couple of days later, while waiting for Mom to finish a phone call in the living room, I overheard her talking to Dad in the kitchen. Her voice carried just enough for me to catch the words. "Diana's living all alone in that big condo. She must get lonely sometimes. It would make perfect sense to let Marcus and Vanessa move in with her." Dad murmured agreement, something about timing being ideal and space going to waste. Hearing them discuss my home like it was a shared family resource hit hard. They weren't asking or even considering my feelings. They were already planning as if my consent was automatic. Those moments made it clear the idea hadn't come out of nowhere. It had been building for months, rooted in the same favoritism I'd felt growing up. Marcus always got the extra help without question, while I learned early to handle everything on my own. Then there was the financial weight pressing down on me every single day. It didn't happen overnight. It built up over years until it became impossible to carry. The student loans from college still sat at $48,000, even after all the overtime shifts and side jobs I'd taken to chip away at them. I had graduated determined to pay my own way, refusing any family assistance, and the balance had shrunk slowly but never fast enough. Each month, the interest reminded me how long this burden would last if nothing changed. Last year, the emergency surgery changed everything. An unexpected complication meant weeks off work and medical bills that climbed to $22,000 after insurance covered only part of the cost. I drained what little savings I had left, skipped any non-essential spending, and picked up freelance marketing gigs on weekends just to keep up with minimum payments. Individually, neither the loans nor the medical debt would have broken me completely, but together they squeezed tighter and tighter until breathing felt difficult. I wasn't living lavishly or making reckless choices. I was simply trying to survive the consequences of doing everything alone. After months of running numbers late at night, staring at spreadsheets that never balanced in my favor, selling the condo became the only realistic way out. It wasn't a sudden, spiteful decision or some dramatic statement. It was the logical step to pay down the principal on both debts, lower my monthly expenses dramatically, and finally regain some control over my finances. I met with a realtor, quietly signed the listing agreement, and accepted an offer within weeks. The whole process happened without telling anyone in my family, because experience had taught me their reaction would focus on how it affected them, not me. Right after I dropped the news at dinner, the backlash started immediately. They labeled me selfish without hesitation, as if protecting my own future somehow betrayed everyone else. Vanessa broke down crying, hand on her belly, talking about how unstable everything would feel for the baby on the way. Marcus looked betrayed. Mom appeared heartbroken, and Dad's voice rose with disappointment. Their anger filled the room before I could even finish a sentence, setting the stage for what would spread far beyond that table in the days to come. Only a few days after the dinner, my phone started ringing non-stop. The calls kicked off with my Aunt Ellen Harper, someone who typically limited her contact to major family events or seasonal greetings. She rang me first thing in the morning, her words laced with a mix of worry and subtle accusation, as she described hearing from Vanessa about the condo and how it left Marcus facing real hardship right when they needed support the most. She went on about the importance of stepping up for siblings in times like these, especially with a new addition to the family on the horizon, and wondered aloud if I had thought through the long-term impact on everyone involved. I kept my answers minimal, but her persistence made it clear this wasn't just a casual check-in. It was a coordinated effort to make me reconsider. Not long after, my uncle Thomas Harper followed suit with his own call, delivering a near-identical script that emphasized disappointment more than anything else. He spoke of family bonds being tested and how turning away now could create rifts that last for years, all while framing my choice as a refusal to help when it mattered. The similarity in their phrasing struck me as no coincidence. It was obvious Vanessa had shared her perspective, widely shaping the conversation before I even entered it. Thomas ended by suggesting I talk to Mom or Dad to smooth things over, but the underlying message felt like pressure wrapped in concern. As those initial contacts faded, the influence expanded in less direct but equally effective ways through online channels. Vanessa shared a simple image of her profile view, highlighting the pregnancy accompanied by a vague reflection on the challenges of navigating big life moments without full backing from those you count on. The post avoided specifics entirely, yet its context invited interpretation, drawing in responses from a broad circle of connections who offered words of solidarity and shared stories of their own family struggles. Seeing the thread grow with each refresh highlighted how quickly assumptions could solidify into accepted truth among people who barely knew the full picture. The ripple soon touched my professional life in unexpected moments. My coworker Megan Brooks approached me during a quiet moment in the hallway, her approach hesitant as she referenced vague social media hints she'd come across and expressed hope that things weren't too stressful at home. The way she phrased it, combined with that unmistakable look of quiet compassion, suggested she viewed me as someone who had perhaps made a harsh call without considering the fallout. In the days that followed, similar subtle shifts appeared with other team members, a colleague skipping over weekend recaps in group chats, or another offering an extra coffee run as if to compensate for unspoken tension. These changes weren't overt criticisms, but created an invisible barrier that altered the flow of daily interactions. Overall, the unfolding situation relied on understatement rather than confrontation. Family communications dwindled gradually, with emails about upcoming gatherings sent without my input or follow-up questions about my schedule. Text threads that once buzzed with quick updates now carried a noticeable lag, responses arriving hours later or phrased in clipped politeness that lacked the warmth of before. This wasn't about explosive arguments or heated exchanges. It was a methodical cooling that reshaped relationships through absence and brevity. From the start, I opted for restraint in handling the influx. Engaging deeply with each inquiry risked escalating misunderstandings or providing fodder for further twists in the tale, so I defaulted to brief acknowledgments or simply let voicemails accumulate without immediate reply. This approach preserved my energy amid the growing disconnect, allowing me to focus inward rather than constantly defending against preconceived notions. Amid the quiet buildup, my best friend Ethan Walsh provided the sole outlet for any real discussion. During a walk in the park one evening, I summarized the key points without delving into every repetitive detail. He absorbed it all thoughtfully, posed a few clarifying questions about how it affected my work focus, and affirmed that my boundaries sounded reasonable given the circumstances. That uncomplicated validation stood as a stark contrast to the judgmental undercurrents elsewhere, offering a brief anchor in an otherwise drifting sea of relations. Over the subsequent weeks, the dynamic hardened into a new normal that demanded adjustment. The lack of inclusion in minor decisions like choosing dates for group outings reinforced a sense of being sidelined without fanfare. Conversations with peripheral acquaintances took on a tentative quality, as if they navigated around an invisible topic. This form of separation lacked the drama of outright conflict, but carried a profound depth, embedding itself in routines, until the chill became part of the everyday landscape, leaving me to navigate the emerging solitude with measured steps. I wiped my hands and opened the door to find Mom, Dad, Marcus, and Vanessa waiting on the landing, their faces set in that familiar blend of resolve and expectation. They moved past me into the living room before I could say much, taking in the half-dismantled space with quick glances at the labeled cartons lining the walls and the bubble-wrapped frames stacked against the sofa. Vanessa lowered herself onto the armchair carefully, one hand resting protectively on her rounded belly as she began speaking for the group. She described how the baby deserved a secure and spacious place to grow up in from the start, painting a picture of family meals in the open kitchen and a nursery with natural light from the large windows. Her tone stayed gentle yet firm, positioning the arrangement as the obvious answer that would benefit everyone involved and strengthen our bonds at such a pivotal time. Dad remained standing near the entryway, his posture straight and commanding as he brought up the modest financial help he had provided each year for things like association fees or unexpected repairs. He phrased it as a tradition born from parental care, then noted quietly that ongoing support of that kind relied on mutual understanding within the family, implying the assistance could end if choices pulled us further apart. Mom positioned herself next to Vanessa, offering occasional nods and reinforcing the central idea that family comes first in every situation. She repeated the phrase several times throughout the discussion, treating it as an unquestionable foundation that had held us together through past difficulties and should guide us now without exception. The exchange flowed in overlapping waves, with Vanessa circling back to the practical advantages for the child's early years and how sharing the condo would create lasting memories for all of us. Dad interjected with reminders of past generosity and the importance of reciprocity when roles reversed. Mom anchored everything with steady variations on family comes first, presenting it as the simple truth that made individual struggles secondary. When a natural lull appeared, I spoke up briefly about the outstanding $48,000 from student loans that had lingered despite consistent extra work, and the additional $22,000 in medical expenses from the previous year's surgery. I kept it factual, hoping the figures might shift the perspective even slightly. They absorbed the information with polite attention, faces reflecting surface sympathy, but no deeper engagement. Vanessa acknowledged that money problems could feel overwhelming, yet maintained that temporary setbacks shouldn't override permanent family needs. Dad conceded finances get tight for everyone at points, but stressed that close relatives find ways to bridge those gaps collectively. Mom responded by affirming once more that family comes first, effectively closing the loop without addressing the debts directly. The pattern continued without deviation, each acknowledgement of my circumstances quickly redirected toward the original expectation. Questions about specifics never arose, and the conversation resumed its focus on obligation unity and the baby's future, as if the numbers had been a minor detour. Standing there amid the packing materials, listening to their coordinated stance, the hypocrisy became impossible to ignore. They demanded sacrifice from me, while framing their own contributions as generous favors that entitled them to control all under the banner of unbreakable family loyalty. By the time they prepared to leave, the visit had solidified positions rather than opened dialogue. Vanessa stood with a final plea about thinking of the grandchild. Dad offered a stern reminder of consequences, and Mom delivered another quiet declaration that family comes first. Their departure left the condo quieter than before, the packed boxes suddenly feeling like evidence in a case they refused to hear. That afternoon taught me clearly how evidence, no matter how straightforward, could fail against a preferred narrative. The truth sat right there in plain view, yet proved powerless against the version where family comes first always meant my priorities came last. That evening, Ethan brought pizza and beer to help me pack. He showed up shortly after I got home from work carrying 2 large pizzas and a 6-pack, along with a few extra flattened boxes he'd picked up on the way. We spread everything out on the coffee table that hadn't been disassembled yet, sitting cross-legged on the floor surrounded by half-filled cartons and rolls of bubble wrap. The smell of hot cheese and tomato sauce filled the room for the first time in days, cutting through the faint dustiness that had started to settle as furniture disappeared piece by piece. We ate casually at first, talking about neutral things like the rainy weather typical for Portland this time of year, or a new project he was handling at his office. Ethan kept the mood easy, steering away from anything too serious until we'd finished most of the food and moved on to actually filling boxes. He didn't launch into big speeches or try to analyze the situation. Instead, he just rolled up his sleeves and started wrapping glasses alongside me, passing supplies, without needing to ask where they were. As the hours passed, his quiet company became the anchor I didn't realize I needed. When a stack threatened to tip, or I struggled with an awkward-shaped lamp, he was there to steady it or hold the tape dispenser ready. Occasionally, he'd look up and give a reassuring nod or murmur something simple like, "I'm here," when the silence stretched a bit long. Those small gestures carried more weight than any long conversation could have, creating a shared space where I could process things at my own pace without feeling alone. Ethan ended up staying much later than he originally planned, helping clear out the entire entertainment center and labeling a dozen boxes before finally stretching and saying he should head home. He left with a quick promise to check in soon, and the door clicking shut behind him left the condo quieter but somehow less hollow than before. Over the following days, I took steps I'd put off for too long and started compiling all the financial paperwork into one organized place. Printing out recent bank statements, retrieving archived loan servicing reports, and sorting through stacks of medical billing explanations turned into an evening project that spread across the dining table. The folder grew thicker with each edition. Pages detailing the persistent $48,000 still owed on education debt, despite years of steady payments alongside itemized hospital charges that added up to $22,000 even after coverage kicked in. Putting it all together wasn't driven by a desire to confront or convince anyone else. It simply felt necessary as a personal safeguard should the demands escalate further. My nights settled into a predictable pattern centered around steady progress through the remaining rooms. Coming home meant changing into comfortable clothes, putting on some background music at low volume, and methodically working through closets or cabinets that had accumulated years of odds and ends. Deciding what to keep for the new place versus what could be donated or discarded offered small but tangible choices I could make without input from others, reinforcing a growing sense of agency amid the larger uncertainty. The atmosphere during those sessions carried a particular weight. Not chaotic or overwhelming, but deeply still in a way that allowed thoughts to surface and resolve on their own. With walls becoming barer and surfaces cleared, everyday sounds took on new resonance, the crinkle of packing paper sharper, the thud of boxes stacking more, pronounced, the occasional creak of floorboards echoing longer in the emptying rooms. This auditory shift mirrored the internal one where distractions fell away, and focus sharpened on what truly mattered moving forward. Most evenings unfolded in solitude, yet that aloneness began to feel constructive rather than isolating. Sorting through old letters tucked in drawers or photographs from trips long past prompted brief reflections before decisions to box or release them, gradually lightening both the physical load and the emotional one attached to certain items. The repetition built resilience layer by layer, turning potential overwhelm into manageable momentum. Ethan stopped by a few more times during that period, always with something practical like extra packing supplies or a quick dinner run. He'd join in for an hour or two, maintaining the same low-key support. No probing questions, just consistent presence that reminded me reliable connections existed outside the strained family ones. Those visits punctuated the solo routine without disrupting it, providing brief warmth in the otherwise focused quiet. Toward the end of those weeks, the document folder lay finished and closed on the counter, a complete record available should the need arise, but not looming as an urgent weapon. The condo had transformed noticeably, with clear paths navigated between neatly labeled stacks, and only essentials left unpacked for daily use. The cumulative effect of those consistent evenings, whether alone or briefly shared with Ethan, forged a quieter form of strength, calm, deliberate, and increasingly unshakable as moving day approached. 2 weeks later, they showed up at the condo door again, this time with Ellen in tow. The knock came firm and persistent on a quiet afternoon, pulling me from the last bits of organizing in the bedroom. I looked through the peephole, first seeing Mom, Dad, Marcus, Vanessa, and Ellen grouped together with serious faces that suggested this wasn't a casual drop-by. Opening the door let in a rush of hallway air, and they entered one by one, moving toward the dining area where the table still stood clear amid the surrounding stacks of sealed boxes waiting for the movers. Dad took the lead as they settled into chairs, his posture straight as he described the purpose of the visit in calm, deliberate words. He called it one last chance to talk things through and rescue the family from drifting apart, permanently emphasizing how much everyone wanted to avoid permanent damage over something that could be resolved with understanding. His voice carried the weight of finality, making the room feel smaller from the moment he started. Vanessa spoke next, easing into the seat closest to the window and placing both hands on her belly as she detailed the strain of recent uncertainty. She painted vivid pictures of sleepless nights, worrying about space for the nursery and the stability a growing child deserves, suggesting the condo offered the ideal setup for shared family life during this critical phase. Tears welled up as she stressed the emotional side, how isolation in a smaller rental would affect not just her and Marcus, but the baby who hadn't even arrived yet. Marcus leaned in when she paused, his expression a blend of frustration and appeal as he brought up the role of an older sibling in times like these. He recalled moments from our shared past when support flowed freely and argued that stepping aside now would create a precedent of division rather than solidarity for his child to inherit. The words came out steady but laced with disappointment, positioning my choice as a break from traditions that had defined us for decades. Dad built on that foundation, sharing short anecdotes from earlier years about overcoming obstacles together and reinforcing that family is everything, no matter the circumstances. He framed the current issue as another test of those bonds, one that required commitment from all sides to pass successfully. The stories served to remind everyone in the room of a supposed shared history where individual needs always bent toward collective good. Mom contributed steadily throughout, her voice softer yet insistent, as she echoed the core message that family is everything in various forms. She reached out to pat Vanessa's hand during emotional moments, or nodded emphatically at Marcus's points, using those gestures to underline unity without needing many words. Her eyes stayed fixed on me much of the time, carrying a plea mixed with quiet judgment that made the repetition feel even heavier. The discussion unfolded in layers, with each person circling back to their key themes in response to others. Vanessa returned to practical concerns about room for cribs and play areas, Marcus to long-term examples for the next generation, Dad to historical family resilience, and Mom to the unchanging priority of family is everything. Ellen sat mostly silent, observing the exchange with occasional small nods that showed alignment without direct input. A natural break eventually appeared, and I rose to fetch the folder I'd kept nearby. Returning to the table, I opened it calmly and laid out the pages one by one. Summaries of loan balances, detailed medical invoices, records of payments stretched over years, arranging them so the figures faced outward for easy viewing. No lengthy commentary accompanied the action. The documents simply occupied the center, their stark totals speaking on their own. Attention shifted to the papers as they passed them around carefully. Vanessa studied a hospital statement before admitting finances can become overwhelming, but pivoted to how those challenges shouldn't overshadow immediate family requirements. Marcus reviewed loan timelines and granted that debt builds pressure, yet maintained relatives distribute burdens rather than isolate them. Dad examined the combined amounts thoughtfully, then reiterated that family is everything, and real hurdles get navigated jointly when commitment exists. Mom skimmed several sheets and reaffirmed the same principle, her tone gentle but immovable. Despite the clear breakdown in black and white, positions remained fixed. Vanessa's tears resumed as she appealed for compassion toward the unborn child. Marcus pressed the sibling obligation angle further, and my parents held firm on family is everything as the guiding rule. Redirects toward the evidence received nods of acknowledgement but no substantive change, the focus snapping back each time to unity and sacrifice. Tension mounted with every loop until the need for resolution became undeniable. I waded through another round, then delivered my statement plainly and without raise. If everyone keeps pushing this and spreading stories, I will cut contact completely. No negotiation. A heavy quiet descended immediately. Vanessa's sobs softened to uneven breaths. Marcus avoided eye contact by staring downward. Dad's features hardened in restrained anger, and Mom's composure broke with visible trembling. Ellen continued her silent watch, offering no intervention or mediation. They rose slowly to depart, movements subdued compared to their arrival. At the threshold, Mom turned back one last time, tears streaming as she managed the parting words. "From now on, you're no longer my daughter." The door shut gently behind the group, leaving behind an abrupt stillness that filled the condo completely. No voice emerged to temper the divide or propose middle ground. The rupture stood absolute, closing off return in a way that felt final and irreversible. 4 months after I moved into the new apartment in Portland, the smaller space adjusted quickly to my needs and brought an immediate sense of simplicity that the condo never quite allowed. With only one bedroom and a combined living kitchen area, maintenance took far less time and money each month. The reduced payment freed up funds that went straight toward rebuilding what had been depleted over years of stretching to cover emergencies. Weekends often involved exploring nearby neighborhoods on foot or by bike, discovering local markets and parks that fit easily into a more restrained lifestyle without feeling like sacrifice. Information about Marcus and Vanessa came through indirect sources since direct communication had stopped completely. Their long-standing habit of counting on parental assistance whenever expenses rose meant they rarely set aside substantial reserves for unexpected gaps. When the landlord raised rent unexpectedly and prenatal checkups added costs they hadn't budgeted for, the monthly amount became harder to meet on time. Notices accumulated, and after missed deadlines, the eviction process moved forward steadily until they received formal notice to vacate. Packing happened hastily over a few days, and they transported essentials back to Mom and Dad's house in multiple carloads, leaving behind items that no longer fit. The return to my parents' home coincided roughly with the early arrival of the baby. Vanessa experienced complications that led to preterm delivery requiring neonatal care and longer hospital monitoring for both her and the infant. Insurance handled a portion, but left significant out-of-pocket expenses that mounted quickly with daily rates and specialized treatment. Mom and Dad stepped in by liquidating part of their retirement accounts to settle the balances, promptly preserving credit, but shrinking the nest egg intended for their later years. On my end, the focus remained on consistent forward movement. The sale proceeds had cleared major portions of both debts, leaving manageable remainders that decreased noticeably with each extra payment applied to principal. Tracking the declining figures provided motivation to maintain disciplined spending, directing bonuses or small windfalls toward acceleration rather than extras. Work performance improved alongside the reduced stress, earning positive feedback and opening doors to projects with better long-term potential. Relationships outside the family grew stronger during that stretch as availability increased for social plans previously sidelined by financial strain. Coworkers invited me to group outings more often, leading to new friendships built on shared interests like weekend farmers markets or evening runs along the Willamette River trails. These connections offered support based on mutual respect rather than obligation, filling evenings with conversation and laughter that felt genuine and unforced. No attempts at contact arrived from Mom, Dad, Marcus, or Vanessa throughout those months. Occasional neutral updates surfaced via distant mutual contacts, but stayed brief and factual without requests or emotional appeals. The complete lack of interaction allowed boundaries to solidify, naturally removing the cycle of expectation that had defined interactions before. The apartment itself evolved into a true reflection of current priorities over time. Minimal furnishings kept clutter low, while carefully chosen pieces maximized functionality and comfort within the limited footprint. Adding personal elements like framed photos from recent trips or shelves for books, read during quieter evenings, turned the place into a haven tailored exactly to present needs. Cooking simple meals in the efficient kitchen or reading by window light became routines that grounded daily life in small, satisfying ways. Financial habits solidified further with automated transfers to emergency savings that grew steadily for the first time in years. Reviewing statements monthly showed clear progress, reinforcing decisions made earlier and building confidence in the path chosen. The overall trajectory pointed towards stability achieved through deliberate steps rather than reliance on outside intervention. Those months demonstrated outcomes linked directly to established patterns. Relying primarily on rescue when challenges arose left little buffer for independent navigation, while removing ongoing demands created opportunity for self-directed recovery. The results unfolded without fanfare, shaping separate realities based on choices that had diverged irrevocably. Now sitting in this small apartment that's completely my own in Portland, some evenings I catch myself thinking back to the way things used to feel with the old family gatherings. The familiar rhythm of Sunday dinners at Mom and Dad's house, the noise of everyone talking over each other, the smell of the same dishes showing up on the table year after year. Those memories still surface from time to time. They carry a quiet ache that hasn't disappeared entirely, a reminder of what once seemed permanent and unbreakable. Yet the regret I expected never really arrived. Choosing to step away brought a clarity that grew stronger with each passing month, making it clear the decision had been necessary rather than cruel. The weight lifted off my shoulders turned out to be heavier than I'd admitted to myself before, and living without that constant pull allowed space for something steadier to take root. Ethan continues to be a regular part of my week, stopping by with takeout, or just to hang out on the balcony when the weather cooperates. His easy presence provides the kind of support that doesn't demand explanations or justifications, and our friendship has deepened naturally in the calmer environment. We talk about everything from work frustrations to plans for weekend hikes, conversations that flow without the shadow of family expectations hanging over them. Beyond Ethan, new connections have formed gradually through shared activities and common interests. A group from the office started a casual running club that meets along the river trails, leading to post-run coffees and invitations to small gatherings. Joining a local photography meetup introduced me to people who share the same curiosity about capturing everyday moments around the city. These relationships build on mutual enjoyment rather than obligation, growing at a comfortable pace that feels authentic and sustainable. The apartment itself has become a true reflection of this shifted life. With fewer rooms to fill, every item earns its place through actual use or quiet meaning. Books line the shelves in careful order, plants sit on windowsills catching the northwest light, and the kitchen holds just enough tools for meals cooked without rush. Evenings often involve trying new recipes or reading with music playing softly, routines that ground the days in simple satisfaction. Financial breathing room has expanded steadily as well. The lower monthly payment leaves margin for contributions to savings that accumulate without interruption, creating a buffer that grows visible on statements each cycle. Watching the numbers climb provides quiet reassurance that the hard choices paid off in tangible security, freeing mental energy for goals further out instead of constant damage control. Looking back on the entire arc, the lesson stands out plainly from my own experience rather than any outside preaching. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's the basic requirement for protecting your well-being when patterns repeatedly drain it. Cutting ties with toxic dynamics isn't heartless. Sometimes it's the only route to genuine health and freedom, allowing room for relationships that uplift instead of undermine. The consequences for Marcus, Vanessa, mom, and dad followed directly from habits long in place. Relying on rescue whenever difficulties appeared left them unprepared when no outside fix was available, leading to lost housing and strained retirement funds. Those outcomes arrived without my involvement, simply as the natural result of choices that hadn't changed. Today, the overall feeling is one of relief, mixed with peace and firm resolve. The path forward looks clearer, built on decisions that prioritize my own stability while leaving space for connections worth keeping. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. It means a lot that you stayed with the story. If anything here resonated with your own experiences, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to set hard boundaries with family? How did it turn out for you? I read every comment and appreciate hearing your perspectives. If this helped or made you think, consider subscribing for more real-life stories like this one.